ISIL is going to lose. And with violent groups like this, there is only one option. We are going to degrade and ultimately destroy this terrorist group.
Oh, this is beyond anything that we've seen.
We will follow them to the gates of hell.
The United States is confronting emerging security challenges on a scale not seen since the rise of the Soviet Union.
Do you know any major Arab ally that embraces ISIL?
I know major Arab allies who fund them, allies who fund them.
We'll examine our Arab allies, specifically the government of Saudi Arabia, and evidence that it's secretly helping al-Qaeda and ISIS.
They essentially are the creator of ISIS and its primary source of financial support today.
If that's true, why would they do that? We'll continue our investigation.
The pot is going to break soon.
Plus, we'll sit down with a millionaire builder who's gunning for Marco Rubio's Senate seat.
You are not a politician. Tell me why you want to be one.
See why Carlos Beruff is running the first big ad blitz in the race for Florida Senate and what makes him tick.
When you get people in Washington that actually go to work at 6 in the morning and they'll quit till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, it's amazing what might be accomplished.
And with the rise of Game of Thrones on TV, we'll show you how it compares to the real-life Game of Thrones this year.
I will build a great, great wall.
This is Money, Power, and Politics.
And I'm king of the hill.
Okay, so this week Donald Trump romped through New York even though he was a little off his game.
How's Joe Paterno?
Well, Joe Paterno is dead.
We gonna bring that back?
And he ain't coming back, even if he did mean the statue. What else you got?
First good move was getting Rex to coach the team. You know, he won championships in New York, AFC, I think twice.
Nope, Rex Ryan never won a championship. Try again.
I was down there, and I watched our police and our firemen down on 7-Eleven.
We've all seen police at 7-Eleven, but that's not what he meant.
Down at the World Trade Center right after it came down.
So here's my theory. Maybe Donald Trump is a little rattled and preoccupied after he discovered who will serve as his loyal delegates.
We serve at your pleasure.
After all his troubles on the road to the White House, Trump basically got those sneaky guys from Game of Thrones.
I was grievously sorry to hear of your troubles on the King's Road.
See, when Trump won all those delegates, he was just getting abstract numbers. He needs to fill those delegate slots with die-hard supporters, so they'll go to the convention and vote for him. And that's where he appears to have hit a snag.
The fix is in. We're gonna lose the brokered convention because they're picking people who are not for Trump. They already told us they're gonna sell out, flip. They are not for Trump.
See, voters don't pick the delegates, local parties do. And based on what some of the delegates have already said, Trump may have been played because Republican bosses may have planted his pool of delegates with rats.
There's a bonus involved. So what do I do?
I'll basically serve as a Trump delegate even though you don't like him. Vote for Trump on the first ballot because the rules say you have to, then after it deadlocks, vote against him until you take him down, even if it plunges the party into the pit of chaos. And you know what that really sneaky guy in Game of Thrones would say about that.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
But in this real-life Game of Thrones, the party elite may be too clever by half because the more Trump rips the system,
It's a fix.
the more he makes it a game of us versus them.
It's a rigged, disgusting, dirty system. It's a dirty system.
And while he's bleeding delegates in convention maneuvers and maybe picking up some delegates who are not fully loyal, he's driving up his support in big states like New York, which we just saw, Pennsylvania and California, where he could still clinch the nomination before it even heads to a convention.
I hope it doesn't involve violence, and I don't think it will. But I will say this, it's a rigged system, it's a crooked system.
And if he comes up short and still feels cheated, you know what he may do with that loyalty oath to the GOP.
A piece of paper.
Okay, time now for Insight with Adam Goodman, who has been spot on all year. Thanks for joining us. Okay.
I should quit winners then.
No, let's not quit. Let's focus on what happens next. And Republican leaders are really in a pickle, aren't they?
They really are. Donald Trump right now, Craig, is controlling the narrative increasingly that if he doesn't make it to 1237, the magic number of delegates, that for some reason the rules have been rigged, the rules are wrong, it's not fair. We as a people believe in fairness, and more as we see the curtain pulled back and we see the party rules, we don't get it. So as the party poobahs are meeting this week in Florida to discuss convention rules, they're more up against it than ever before to prove not only to themselves, but to all Republicans around the country that the process itself is not only based on the rules, but is ultimately and fully fair.
Give us predictions heading into the following round. That's going to be Connecticut. It's going to be Delaware. It's going to be Pennsylvania.
Trump's on a roll, and he'll continue on a roll into Indiana. He's going to win big. He should win big. He's kind of the regional play. He won in Massachusetts, won in New Hampshire, won in New York. He'll continue to win there. In terms of Bernie Sanders, he's got a real shot in Connecticut. He actually does. He needs a win where it's unexpected. I think that one, the jury's out there. But yeah, the next week is going to show more and more that we're getting close to that mark where a decision will be made.
Adam Goodman, thanks again for your insight.
Thank you.
Coming up, Carlos Beruff is railing on Washington politicians, so we'll ask him why he wants to be a Washington politician.
A lot of these people that are in Washington today do not have any idea how to run a business.
A millionaire businessman just came out of nowhere, blasting the airwaves, blasting Obama, and blasting the system.
It's ridiculous. Let's get rid of them.
Before you dismiss Carlos Beruff as a nobody, remember the story of Rick Scott.
So I bet you're wondering, where have I seen that handsome bald guy before, right?
Scott also came out of nowhere and took off the same way. Carlos Beruff is a friend of Governor Scott's. He's a Manatee County home builder who's building his campaign as Scott did 6 years ago.
Obama's a disaster.
He thinks more government is always the answer.
The Washington politicians are worthless.
The same old politicians and the same old political games.
I'm Carlos Beruff. I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman running for Senate, and I approve this message. The experts want me to read a bunch of political crap off this teleprompter.
All right, Mr. Beruff, thank you for joining us. You are not a politician. Tell me why you want to be one.
I don't want to be a politician ever. Let's start with that. But I do want to be somebody that goes to Washington to fix the large problems this country faces.
So you say Washington politicians are worthless. You don't mean all politicians in Washington, do you? Some of them you like.
Not many.
What about Marco Rubio? It's his seat presently. Is he a worthless politician from Washington?
I don't want. Marco Rubio had aspirations, obviously, and he had some kind of a calling to do what he did. And I think that you sometimes have to follow those instincts.
You go back in time to the 80s, for example. Reagan and Tip O'Neill disagreed on just about everything, but they found ways to work together.
That's right. That is a perfect marriage.
How do you do that? Is there a Democrat who comes to mind in the Senate today who you think you could have that kind of relationship with, where you could talk, make things happen?
I just don't know enough about them. That's why you have to get there and get to know them. And you don't get to know people unless you meet them and look them in the eye. And you have conversations about what it is we're trying to do. Because I believe that there's plenty of good people who want to do the right thing for this country, but there's a lack of leadership and there's a lack of detail. Everybody wants to talk in sound bites instead of in details.
Your bio says you were born in Miami, but your voter registration that you filled out said Cuba. Which is it, and what's the contradiction there?
Well, quite frankly, I don't remember where I was on that day that I was born very well, but my birth certificate says I was born at Jackson Memorial Hospital. So I suspect that somebody in my office accidentally filled in a blank, and they've turned it into a great big deal. I think it's actually sort of funny.
It looks as if you're spending $1.5 million of your own money on these ads we're seeing. Is that correct?
I don't know.
I
wire money when they ask me for it.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
Some part.
Why spend that much money now?
Because I believe if a person's not willing to bet on themselves, why should anybody else bet on you?
What's your goal? What do you want to get out of this ad run? What should your poll numbers be, say in 3-6?
Oh, I don't know. I have consultants that deal in those things. All I'm doing is running around the state, meeting as many people as I can so I can look them in the eye, like I'm doing with you, and they have to sense whether or not I'm the right guy. All the money in the world doesn't win an election. We've seen that.
And you're a friend of Governor Scott. Assess his role as governor the past few years on a scale of 1 to 10.
10. Is there an 11 in that scale?
An 11. We'll give you an 11. better than as good as it gets. Yes. Tell me why.
Why? Because he did exactly what he told the voters he was going to do.
Doing what he said he was going to do. I can think of at least one exception to that, and it's the issue of Medicaid expansion. How and why did you change your mind on that?
Oh, I didn't change my mind at all.
We'll be looking at that over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I don't remember saying a few weeks. I don't think that's what I said.
I cannot in good conscience deny Floridians the health care. I'm not going to support it.
I think he evolved in the position simply because as he understood more how the federal government was going to play those cards, and at the end of the day, after 3 years, it all gets settled on the taxpayers of Florida to be legacy costs. That's the problem with the federal government. They give you money, and then they take it away, but they leave you the responsibility of fulfilling those unfunded mandates.
And in this battle of Republican versus Republican, did you take the position of the Senate in wishing to accept federal money to expand health care for those who don't have it, or the governor's position, we shouldn't do it?
No, we shouldn't do it. You have to completely take Obamacare and repeal it for the simple reason that it's a bad law on 40 years worth of bad rules and bad laws. Nobody even understands it. I tried to read it. It refers to chapters and verse and amendments. You can't read the whole thing. It's almost as bad as the tax code.
Congress has tried to repeal it many times. Republican leaders in it have. What would be different with Carlos Beruff in the Senate?
Well, hopefully there's a change of the executive office.
But you can't guarantee that.
No, well, I cannot guarantee that, obviously.
And if that does not come to pass, how do you repeal Obamacare?
That's a good question. We'll have to deal with if I'm the senator from Florida, I'll have to deal with that.
You also speak of securing the border. How do you do it, and do you support Donald Trump's plan to build that wall and make Mexico pay for it?
Well, I'd love to have anybody pay for it other than the American taxpayer, so that's for sure. But closing the border is a necessity, not just for the immigration issue, it's also a terrorist threat, and you have $5 heroin in different parts of this country, and 70% of the heroin comes through that border.
How do you do it? How do you close that border? How do you secure it?
Well, I think that a wall is a perfectly good idea. I mean, I think the Chinese built one a few years ago. It was done, and it was effective to deterrent to their enemies. We have to do the same. Obviously, Mexico is not our enemy. What is our enemy is undocumented workers that are taking advantage of many of the social programs this country offers that's costing the taxpayers tens of billions of dollars, if not hundreds of billions.
Then for the 11, 12 million plus who are living here illegally, what would you do? Deport them?
I think that talking about that portion of immigration reform until you close the border is a moot point. I'm a business person who I eat elephants, but you eat them at one bite at a time. And the first bite has got to be closing the border.
What's driving you to run this year?
I have a 19-year-old, I have a 3-year-old, and I'm expecting a third son in June.
Those sound like 3 good reasons not to run. This is going to take a lot of your time, particularly if you succeed.
When you're 58 years old and you've been fortunate enough to do the most important thing that a person is, which is to take care of the people you love and not have to worry about the finances anymore in your life, then the next most important thing is to leave behind a country that gives your children the opportunity to dream and achieve their goals like I've been able to do. And quite frankly, I don't think that this country's been heading in that direction for some time.
Mr. Beruff, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, we'll examine spending in Enterprise, Florida, and evidence of a terror support network from Saudi Arabia to Tampa Bay. Well, Enterprise Florida spends public money to lure jobs to Florida. The CEO is stepping down after 13 months on the job. And our investigative reporter, Tina Jensen, first revealed the cost of that job.
I need $47 million.
Bill Johnson landed one of the highest paid gigs in the state last year, becoming the governor's pick for president and CEO of Enterprise Florida, otherwise known as EFI, and Secretary of Commerce. Johnson signed a contract worth $265,000 a year. He also got a $50,000 bonus after 5 months, and every month he gets $600 just for a car.
As I'm told,
he was key to Governor Rick Scott's #1 priority, to get legislators to put $250 million in state money into Enterprise Florida's Job Incentives Fund.
If we don't do this, it's a big mistake for our kids.
Last month, lawmakers ultimately killed the plan amid ongoing questions about EFI's operations. Last week, Johnson said he's stepping down. The same day, Governor Scott sent out a letter to EFI board members saying they should get ready for a shakeup for how they do business, including a full review of how they're spending money. Fox 13 learned a review began months ago after our November investigation raised questions about Johnson's expenses.
When the story came out and questioned some expenses and some policies, we wanted to make sure that, in fact, we were good stewards of the public's money.
We first brought you that story in November when we found lots of questionable charges on his expense reports, things that wouldn't pass muster in state government, like more than $350 for a dinner for himself and 2 publicly paid staffers at a premier Tampa seafood restaurant.
For the most part, found that our policies were entirely proper. The expenditures were very reasonable, but that doesn't mean we can't do better.
At the time of our story, EFI defended Johnson's expenses, saying EFI paid for them with a very small portion of their funding that comes from corporate donations. But some of it was public money. Johnson ordered $6,000 worth of custom-made lounge chairs for his new office, paid for by taxpayer dollars until we started asking for public records. That's when Enterprise says he returned them. The governor wouldn't answer our questions then, and he wouldn't answer any questions now. But since he wants a further review of expenses, he might want to look at this. We found that under his contract with Enterprise Florida, Johnson received his full EFI salary while still working part-time as a Miami-Dade County employee until the end of last June so he could consult on a big public works project. And Johnson said publicly he wanted to stay in Miami. So instead of moving Johnson to Enterprise Florida's headquarters in Orlando, Fox 13 learned EFI used at least $170,000 state dollars to expand their operations in Miami. There was $40,000 for new furniture for Johnson and 4 other staffers at the Miami office, including an $1,800 coffee table for Johnson's office, $350 desk chairs for each office, a $5,000 conference table, and a $1,000 side table for the reception area. They spent $7,000 of your money for 4 flat-screen TVs and a refrigerator, and more than $60,000 of public money for new computers and accessories, alarm systems, phone and cable, and IT services for remote operations.
The Miami office was undersized.
Enterprise Florida Vice Chair Alan Becker, a Fort Lauderdale lawyer, defends the expansion.
It's the office that's responsible for all of our international activities. We have many foreign visitors and dignitaries come.
The expansion also meant EFI's annual rent at the SunTrust building went from $178,000 to $250,000.
The expense of the Miami office is very reasonable. In fact, I have my own office in Coral Gables, like 2 minutes from there, and the Enterprise Florida office pays far less rent than we do.
With Enterprise Florida's operations under scrutiny, costs to state taxpayers for things like office space will be given a hard look. And Becker says they're already revising policies for expenses and reimbursements.
It's about creating policies to make sure that there's never any question that the taxpayer money is being well spent.
According to Johnson's contract, an early exit means he's also owed his annual salary of $132,000.
Coming up, we'll look into claims that Saudi Arabia is secretly supporting our enemy and how it connects to Florida.
Well, the president plans to release evidence that suggests the Saudi government secretly supported the September 11th attacks. If it's true, it begs the question of why. Well, let's go back to what top U.S. officials said in 2003.
At the moment, I do not think the whole story is out there.
Notice how Bob Graham raised his eyebrows on that point. Our former senator co-chaired the investigation and helped write the report that 2 presidents kept secret for 13 years.
It's all, to this date, been effectively buried.
Graham now claims the al-Qaeda attacks were secretly supported and funded by the government of Saudi Arabia. And he also accuses the Saudis of bankrolling the ISIS terrorists were fighting today.
One reason they would have done it was to advance their cause.
When Saddam Hussein threatened Saudi Arabia, the Saudi king trusted American troops to defend his country instead of Osama bin Laden's forces. Bin Laden was furious and could have expressed his anger by fueling civil unrest in Saudi Arabia. The royal family certainly saw how civil unrest had toppled the Shah of Iran. So Graham said the Saudis could have appeased bin Laden by secretly funding his attacks against America. And he said the Saudi government may still be playing both sides today to advance its cause while protecting the royal throne.
We provide them with security, and they supply us with a guaranteed source of petroleum.
But this also begs another question. If our ally is supporting our enemy, why would two U.S. presidents cover it up?
A strategy by some would be to split the United States and Saudi Arabia, and we're not going to let that happen.
Take a look through history. Our presidents have maintained close relations with the royal family for a very long time. If we lose that relationship, it could disrupt oil flow and our economy and key bases we use to fight terrorists, and could destabilize the Saudi government. And as we saw in Iran with the Ayatollah, a far more hostile regime could emerge.
Well, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics on YouTube for much more on this and other investigations. That's our show. Thank you for joining us.